Episode 7 is called Defiant Jazz, and it is my favorite episode of this season. It starts off with Mark and Ragabi at the school that Mark used to work at. Mark asks Ragabi, "Who are you?" She replies, "Come with me." They walk down a bunch of hallways and end up in a basement area of the school, and this is the area that she's been working out of. Ragabi says to Mark that he could have thrown Petey's phone out weeks ago. Why didn't you? Mark asks again, "Who are you?" She replies, "I'm the one that helped your friend." Mark replies, "You didn't help him. You killed him. When you did the severance procedure, it ultimately killed him." Ragabi then defends her actions by saying that the procedure didn't kill Petey at all, and that if he followed the post-op instructions like she said and not simply run away at the first sign of sickness, he would have been okay if he stuck with her. She then tells Mark that she's the one that put the chip in his head, and she's still the only one that can deactivate it. Mark says, "Maybe I don't want it taken out." She says, "Maybe your innie does." Then she goes on to say that she actually hates the word innie and finds it offensive. Mark says that his innie lives his own life, and as a result, he gets to live his. Ragabi says maybe he loves it, but maybe he doesn't. Mark wouldn't know, and he'll never know. Mark then says that he's not a bad person, but right then, Mr. Grainer shows up. He says, "Mr. Scout?" Mark says, "Do I know you?" Mr. Grainer says, I work with you down there." He asks Mark who he's talking to. He says, "It's okay. I'm her friend." Ragabi then comes from behind him and beats him to death with a baseball bat. Don't think they were friends. She gives Mark his security card, claiming it has full access and cannot be tracked by anyone, and that his innie will know what to do with it. She says it will be okay, she will be in touch, and they will finish what Petey started. Mark arrives home and takes off everything he was wearing and tosses it into a trash bag. As he's doing this, Alexa wakes up and walks out into the hall. I don't think that he remembered that she was even there. She said that he's being weird. She's been up for an hour and he wasn't there. He said that he needed to drive a little. She asked him if she wants her to leave. He says maybe. She leaves. Mark takes Mr. Grainer's key card before walking out the door to head to work. He takes his clothes that were in the trash bag from last night and tosses them into the trash bin. Mrs. Selvig, or Miss Cobell, notices this and says that he usually does that later in the day. She, of course, knows something is going on, and she's starting to sense more and more that Mark is involved. Mr. Milchek installed a door that would lock MDR employees in their office for the duration of their shifts. He then goes into the bathroom stall to find that card that Dylan stole. Milchek delivers the card back to Bert and tells him that he's a great leader and he deserves something special. Bert is hoping it's not another trip back to the break room since he just went yesterday. Milchek says it's something else. Stay tuned. Dylan shows up and asks what the hell was that to Mr. Milchek. Milchek tells him it was the overtime contingency and it's for emergency use only. Dylan asks if that was his son. Milchek says yes, but he shouldn't tell anyone, and he shouldn't learn the son's name, as that would make things harder. Dylan seemingly agrees, but he's more in shock of what he's just seen. Remember, to Dylan's innie, this just happened. Milchek then greets Mark at the elevator, and he says there's a new protocol, and he needs to escort Mark to his desk. When they get there, Mark says, "What, are we locked in now?" Milchek says he prefers the term safely situated. Howie asks Mark what's going on with the doors being locked like that. Mark kind of ignores it to check in on Irv and Dylan. Dylan is clearly still in shock and is kind of quiet. Milchek calls Cobell to say Grainer hasn't come in yet, and everything is fine. It's just he's wondering where she is. She's at Mark's house, continuing her pursuit to be the baby's full-time caretaker. She stays later to talk to Devin, trying to find out more information about Mark. Devin brings up the senator's wife and how she didn't remember her. She is thinking that Lumen is severing people outside of work, and that it is something bigger than what they are leading on. She thinks this woman has been severed to carry out the term of the pregnancy. Cobell then asks why Mark did it. Devin says it was about losing his wife. She then asked Devin if he ever talks about her. She said when her husband passed, she thought she saw him everywhere. She then asked Devin if Mark ever thinks he sees her. Back at MDR, Dylan continues to lose it little by little, while Irv bugs Mark about soap not being labeled. Mark says, "What are you talking about?" And then Irv says, "Oh, that sounds like an O&D question, actually. I should go and see Bert." Both Mark and Dylan tell him that he can't leave right now. Then Milchek walks in with an MDE because Helly got to the 75% mark on her project. An MDE is a musical dance experience. Milchek explains that she must choose one genre and one accessory. She chooses the maraca and Defiant Jazz, the episode title, as her genre. Milchek urges all refiners to take advantage of the opportunity presented. The music starts and Milchek turns on mood lights as they all start to dance outside of Dylan. Milchek then perhaps has the best dance scene in all of TV history, and they are all actually enjoying themselves. But the camera keeps going back to Dylan, showing him growing more and more uncomfortable. Then Mark digs into his pocket and he finds Mr. Grainer's key card. He quickly puts it back in as the dancing continues. Milchick dances with every single refiner on the MDR, and then he makes his way over to Dylan. He tries to get Dylan to dance, but Dylan snaps. He stands up and shoves Milchick into the record player and bites him when he's on the ground. Milchick says that he broke the skin, and he's reporting this to Miss Cobell. Dylan says, yeah, you want to see her together? Implying about Milchick using the overtime contingency last night. Milchick then storms out. Then Dylan tells everyone about the overtime contingency, and he says he woke up in his house last night with Milchick and saw his son, who hugged him. He says Milchick quickly pulled him off, and it was over. It happened so fast. He then says, now I'm supposed to just have that in my head now and never see him again? Helly says that they can use the overtime contingency for themselves. Irv says it's surely somewhere they can't access, but then Mark pulls out Grainer's key card. Helly asks why his Audi has the key card to the head of security. He has no idea, but they all decide it's time for a field trip, and Helly wonders if there are any security guards outside of Grainer that even work there. Mark says Petey once showed him where the security office is, and they can actually do this. Once they get to the hall, Irv runs off and says he has to make sure that Bert is okay. Helly and Mark continue on while Dylan stays back at MDR. They find the office, go inside, they wander around a little bit until Helly finds a board of names, and they find all of MDR listed. She then opens up a job manual looking for directions on the overtime contingency. But as she's doing that, Mark sees that Cobell is now in the elevator heading down towards the severed access floor. Helly finds the info that she needs in the manual, rips it out, and they head back to MDR before Cobell can see. But Natalie stopped Cobell before she could even get there, and she says she has the board on the phone that they need to talk right now because Grainer is dead. Cobell says whoever killed Grainer is probably whoever reintegrated Petey. The board again says it's impossible, but Cobell assures them it is, and she even says that she has proof in Petey's chip. She wants to meet them in person and talk it over. They agree that they will hear her out at the Egan family gala next week in person. Irving makes his way to O&D, and he finds that they are throwing Bert a retirement party. Back at MDR, Dylan is surprised to find out no one was in the security office. Helly reads the instructions to the overtime contingency in the manual, and they find out that they can definitely do it and wake themselves up on the outside world. Dylan offers to be the one to wake everyone up and stay back, since he already woke up once outside, so that they all can experience it. Irving is just watching Bert's party as Milchick gives a speech, and he notices that Irving is there. He says he needs to look at their new doors. He plays a video from Bert's Audi recording a message to his innie saying thanks to his coworkers and to his innie. He ends the message by saying, though he is unaware of it at a conscious level, he will never forget them. He thanks them all again, and he says good job, buddy, to his innie. Irv then loses it on Milchick for not being severed, and he says he doesn't understand what it's like to be in their position. Milchick demands he goes back to MDR, but Bert asks him to stay. Milchick allows it, but he's clearly upset with Irving. Milchick then plays Bert's any retirement song selection as Bert shakes hands with all of O&D, and then comes Irv. Milchick notices them shaking hands and sees the look they give each other. Irv leaves very upset. MDR sees him walk back in upset, and Mark checks in on him. Irving says, let's burn this place to the ground. They all shake their heads and agree. Mark is now back at home, drinking heavily. Alexa then shows back up to get her phone. He gives it back to her. She notices that he is hammered, so she asks if he's okay. She then goes to leave, and he tries to stop her. He apologizes for the night before. Then he says, you don't think I'm over my wife? So he pulls out a picture of her, and he rips it up. He tries to get that to prove that he's over her. Alexa doesn't like that at all, and she tries to leave again. Mark follows her outside, says they should talk about it, but Alexa just gets in her car and says goodbye, Mark. Mark goes back inside, and he picks up the pieces of the photo. He puts them on the table and decides to tape it back together. As he's taping it back together, her face is obstructed the whole time until finally he removes his finger. His wife is Miss Casey. What a way to end an episode.